He is accompanied by Moshe's inveterate foes, Dasan and Aviram. And joining them are 250 distinguished members of the community who offer the sacrosanct Ketores, the incense, to prove their worthiness for the priesthood. And we'll dwell a little bit more on that later in tonight's topic. The earth opens up and swallows the mutineers, and a fire consumes the Ketores offerers. A subsequent plague is stopped by Aaron's offering of Ketores. Aaron's staff miraculously blossoms and brings forth almonds to prove that his designation as high priest is divinely ordained. Hashem commands that a teruma, an uplifting offering, be given to the Kohanim priests from each crop of grain, wine, and oil, as well as from all firstborn sheep and cattle and other specified gifts. I have some competition tonight. So what do we have tonight? Tonight we're going to focus on the story of Korach, but perhaps not as a story as every story in the Torah. It's not a story that took place some 3,400 years ago, but rather it's a part of Torah. Torah meaning a lesson. And the question is, what can this story of 3,300+ years ago teach us here and now in 2022? And I believe this is a very, very important lesson. And bear with us as we travel through the details. Equality. It's a big name, big word. Everyone talks about it nowadays, right? Equality. Everyone's got to be equal. We're all equal under the law. Everyone's got to be treated equal, regardless of their background, regardless of what they look like, regardless of their identities. Everyone's got to be equal. Everyone has to fit into equality. And the question is, what is equality? Or rather, nowadays, everyone talks about equality, but what does the Torah have to say of equality? Is that a Torah value, or is that a newfangled Western value? And perhaps even if it is a Torah value, what does it mean in the context of Torah? And so tonight's class, we will get right into the core of this issue. What is equality? What is the Torah's view of equality? And does Torah see it as a positive value? We'll begin with the first Torah portion. Right in the beginning of the book of Genesis, chapter 1, verse 27, the verse tells us something powerful. And God created man in his image. In the image of God, he created him, male and female, he created them. Everyone's equal. Everyone was created in the image of God, which leads us to the obvious question. If everyone was created in the image of God, shouldn't everyone be exactly the same? If we're all equally valued and we're all created in the image of God, how can it be that each person has a combination and a different combination of skills, temperaments, personality, characteristics, opportunities, spiritual inclinations? Everyone seems to be on a different level of the spectrum. In every area in life. Are we all really equal? Are we all in the image of God? And if we're all in the image of God, how does that work out that there are these different levels? And if there are different roles and there is some sort of hierarchy, then how can there be equality if there's a hierarchy? And that's where the story of Korach comes in, because that exactly was Korach's disagreement with Moses. Here's Moses, a leader of the Jewish people. He just took the Jewish people out of Egypt. It's in 1 year, as we just ran through, just over a year. He took the Jewish people out of Egypt. And before that, it was a full year of leading the miraculous plagues as they affected the Egyptians. Moses was nothing short of the greatest miracle worker that ever was and ever will be. And then God says testimony that he spoke to him face to face, whatever that means. No one else has that attribute. No one else has that notch on their belt. rung on their ladder, that they spoke to God face to face. He brought the manna, he facilitated the money, he facilitated the giving of the Torah at Mount Sinai, he facilitated all the miracles that happened in that prior year. He built the temple, the traveling temple, the tabernacle. He led the Jewish people through the desert, and now he's going to lead them for the next 39 years, for a sum total of 40 years, with never-ending compassion, unwavering patience. And yet, it wasn't without detractors. Comes Korach, his first cousin. And Korach is displeased, and displeased is an understatement. And Korach says, Moses, who do you think you are? Your leadership? You're nothing special. So you spoke to God. We all saw God at Mount Sinai. God spoke to all of us face to a degree. We all heard God at Mount Sinai. You're nothing special. You're nothing more than all of us. And not only that, nepotism, you go ahead and you appoint your brother, Aaron, as the high priest. We should all be leaders. Right, I forget who said it, one of the Israeli politicians. He says that America has yes, it's a big country, but it's a president leading 300 citizens. In Israel, it's a prime minister leading a country of 6 million prime ministers. Korach says, no, we all got to be leaders. We all got to be Moses. We all got to be the ones leading the Jewish people. We're all leaders. We're all equal. We're all the same. It's not fair. We're all equal. Now, Korach was a member of Jewish nobility. He was a Levite and he was wealthy, but he wasn't satisfied. He wanted that everyone should be equal. Moses is nothing special. Moses is nothing greater than everyone else. And what was the end? The end was a bitter end. Korach, together with his cronies, which was Dasan and Aviram, who were the rabble-rousers in the desert, these two characters who were always trying to find issue with Moses the entire time up until that point, even when they were still in Egypt. And then there was 250 other leaders of the Jewish people that sided with Korach in his rebellion, his mutiny against Moses. And as the verse in this week's Torah portion tells us, text 2a, verse 24, speak to the congregation, said God, saying, withdraw from the dwelling of Korach, Dasan, and Aviram. The earth beneath them opened its mouth and swallowed them and their houses and all the men who were with Korach and all the property. Korach, Dasan, Aviram, and their families and all their property and all the men who were with them, except for the 250 chieftains, leaders, were all swallowed by the ground. Kind of this miraculous sinkhole that opened up and swallowed them alive wherever they were throughout the entire encampment. Only they were swallowed alive. And what happened with the 250 chieftains who were with them? The verse continues. A fire came forth from Hashem and consumed the 250 men who had offered up the incense. Now, these events are very unnatural and very bizarre. Why? Why with these miraculous forms of death, of capital punishment? Granted, you say that Korach deserved capital punishment, all his cronies deserve capital punishment. All right, fine, it's a discussion for a different time, but let's take it for face value that that's what they deserved. God could have just stopped creating them, or on a less Kabbalistic, less mystical fashion, he could have just made them die right there on the spot, drop dead. All 250 plus Korach and his cronies, they should all suddenly get a heart attack and die. Why did there have to be this miraculous, unique, dual punishment where Korach and his immediate cronies, they got swallowed by the earth, and the 250 chieftains got burnt by fire? There seems to be more depth to their punishment, some symbolism at hand that's not readily visible. And the Abarbanel, the famous Portuguese sage who had the chance to stay back when the King Ferdinand and Queen Isabel expelled the Jewish people. They begged him to stay. He was a member of the court. He was involved in their finances. He was an advisor. And they begged Dan Yitzchak Abarbanel to stay. They even offered to keep 10 men, Jewish men, so he can have a minyan to pray. Imagine that. After 1492, the Inquisition, they offered to keep 10 Jewish men in the court so Dan Yitzchak Abarbanel can stay and have a minyan. And he refused. He says, I go with my people. And he left Portugal and his entire wealth behind. During his running, he wrote a commentary in those few years on the Torah. And in his commentary, the Abarbanel asks this question. Text 3, why did Moshe pray for the earth to open up and swallow them and not for the fire to burn them? And why did he see fit to pray for the earth to open up and swallow them? What connection is there between this punishment and their sin? There's got to be more to the story. And in 60-minute fashion, right, there you go. Say, what does 60 minutes and an old Jewish Bubby have in common? So, and here's the rest of the story. The exchange between Korach and Moses has more depth than what we see on face value. Let's get back to the verses that show us the beginning of the disagreement, right in the beginning of our Torah portion, text 5. The verse begins as follows. Then Korach took himself aside together with Dasan and Aviram and On ben Pelas. On ben Pelas is a fascinating topic for another time. He was a shaky individual. He wasn't really sure which side of the fence to be on. And he took Korach's side, and his wife, to her merit, saved him, which is why we don't find On ben Pelas later on in the story. And the Medrash says from here we see the power of the Jewish woman, where On ben Pelas was a leader amongst the Jewish people. Nonetheless, he had to be saved by his wife. And what happens? These men, together with 250 of the nation's reputable chieftains, confronted Moshe. They surrounded Moshe and Aaron and said to them, you have taken too much greatness for yourselves. This whole nation is holy, and God is among us all. So why would you rise above God's congregation? We're all equal. What was his cry? What was his goal? Seemingly, Korach's goal was equality, unity. We're all the same. We're all equal. We refuse to acknowledge that there may be a hierarchy between the Jewish people, within the Jewish people, with some having more holy positions, some having less holy positions. Everyone's equal, equality, which seems quite the noble goal. No one should be holier than thou. No one should see themselves as if they're holier than others. So what went wrong? If Korach had this lofty goal under the banner of utter equality, what went wrong that this man who tried to bring about equality instead became the archetype of quarreling? And why do I say he became the archetype of equality? Because the Talmud, when it discusses quarreling, when it discusses disagreement, it utilizes Korach as the archetype of quarreling, which is not in the sake of heaven. The archetype of disagreement, of machloket, is Korach. So not only didn't he become the poster child, or not only didn't he become who heralded utter equality, but on the contrary, he became the poster child for disagreement, for inequality, for quarreling, for strife, for fighting. He became the poster child. Like the verse says, Rav said, says the Talmud, that one who is involved in a quarrel transgresses a negative precept. As it says, one should not be like Korach and his congregation. He became the prohibition. Don't be like Korach, don't quarrel. And the Rebbe asked this question, how did it go so wrong? It's such a lofty idea. How did it go south? How could a demand for unity among Jews result in dispute? And how could the dispute be so polarizing that it's become the prototype for every quarrel among Jews forever after? A few verses after those initial verses from this week's Torah portion, we have Moses' response. And Moses tells Korach, like, you know what? You're not starting up with me. You think I want this position. You think I want this hierarchy in Judaism. This is the system that God set up. And therefore, God's going to be the one to prove who is right and who is wrong. Tomorrow morning, he tells him, we're all going to stand before God. We're all going to bring the incense. And then God will show who is right and who is wrong. And then the subsequent verses that we quoted earlier, where the next morning they brought the incense, the fire came and consumed the 250 chieftains, and Korach and his family were swallowed by the earth. And so God showed quite visually and quite literally who is right and who is wrong. But the answer to Korach's claim and to our question of equality and where Korach went wrong is in Moses' response, that first statement. What does Moses say? In the morning, says the verse, this is Moses' response to Korach, God will make known who is his and who is holy, because if you're God's, you're holy, and he will draw them near to him, and the one he chooses, he will draw near to him. The simple meaning of the verse is Moses giving him a time, sending a reminder on his phone. Tomorrow morning at 10 a.m., this is when it's going to happen, where God's going to show us. But this unique terminology and choice of words which Moses uses is a little bit out of place. In the morning. Why in the morning? Why not later that evening? Or why not tomorrow? Why specifically in the morning? The Midrash and Rashi, our favorite commentary, quotes it here on the verse, explains that it's not just telling him a date, tomorrow morning at 10 a.m., that's when God's going to show who's right and who's wrong. But there's something deeper to it. Let's see in the text itself. Text 8b. Moshe says to Korach, God assigned boundaries to his world. Are you able to transform morning into evening? Doing so is as impossible as it would be for you to undo this separation. In other words, this hierarchy of Moses, Aaron, and the Jewish people. As the verse states, it was evening and it was morning, and he separated. Similarly, it says, Aaron was set apart to sanctify him. Moses is telling Korach, you're claiming that, you know what, we got to have hierarchy. But we have to have equality. There's no hierarchy, equality. Marxist idealism. That's who you are, you're a Marxist. Everyone's got to be equal, right? Some are more equal than others. Everyone's got to be equal, Korach. That's what you say. We have to abolish the separation of Moses, Aaron, the 70 elders, the Levites, the priests, and then the Israelites. We have to abolish all those differences and everyone's equal? Boiker, in the morning. What's Moses telling him within the morning? Not just a timing. There is morning and there is evening. There's a clear, distinct boundary. There's the morning and there is the evening. There are two different times, and together they make up a complete day. So too amongst the Jewish people, there are boundaries. There's a hierarchy. There's Moses, there's Aaron. This is the system that God put in place. And just like you cannot abolish the separation between night and day, you cannot abolish the separation in the hierarchy of the Jewish people. This is the system that God put in place. And he tells Korach, that's it. God put it in place. Give it up. Give up your mutiny. It may be a great ideal. Give it up. And really, that's where Korach should have stopped. He should have understood what Moses was telling him, but he didn't. He pushed forth. to try to abolish that boundary put in place by God. But that's not really the entirety of their discussion. It goes deeper than that. There's much more to what Korach truly desired than just abolishing the boundaries and having equality. And there's much more to Moses' answer than to just say, this is the way it is. There's a lot of depth to each of their positions. And we'll begin back to where we began in the beginning of the class in the book of Genesis. On the account of creation, the ethics of our fathers, the sages, tell us an interesting fact. Text 9. The world was created with 10 utterances. If you go through the account of creation, 10 times it says, and God said, let there be, and there was. And God said. Each time God said, it came into existence. First time it doesn't say, and God said, it says in the beginning, God created heaven and earth. That was the first utterance. And then there are 9 other times, for example, the most famous, God said, let there be light, and there was light. The world was created with 10 utterances, say the sages. What does this teach? For surely it could have been created with 1 utterance. God's not limited to anything. God could have just said 1 utterance and the whole world would have come into being. So why did God create it with 10 utterances? This was in order to punish the wicked who destroyed the world that was created with 10 utterances, and to give a good reward to the righteous who maintained the world that was created with 10 utterances. What does that mean? Reward, punishment, 10 utterances. With God creating the world with 10 utterances, God thereby granted the world its inherent quality of abundance and multiplicity. God used 10 utterances, and with that, God put into the very fabric of creation the concept of multiplicity. Had the world been created with a singular utterance, with 1 utterance, then the entirety of creation would have reflected God's own singular nature, a unified mass of oneness. But God didn't want such a world. God wanted a world which can be broken down into an infinite amount of words and letters, of infinite amount of creations, an infinite amount of multiplicity and individuality into the very fabric of creation. And through that multiplicity, through that individuality, to come to the recognition of the divine. This format of creating the world also allows for boundaries within God's creations, because it gives each creation its own definition, its own limitations, which distinguish it from other creations. They were created with a different amount of letters. They were created with a different utterance. They were created with a different purpose and a different goal and a different mission. And this is where Korach came in. He was a great visionary. He was able to see things in a way that were out of this world. He saw the deeper truth. He saw the core sense of equality that, if realized, can in fact erase all multiplicity and boundaries. He saw the divine at the core of everything. And what do I mean by that? We'll get a little Kabbalistic here. There are four ways to deal with variety. And what I mean by variety, there are four ways to deal with different styles or clashing perspectives, different opinions. There are four ways to deal with that, right? Say, for example, I have one opinion and Charlie's got another opinion. There are four ways to deal with that difference. First way is tolerance and respect. I have my opinion. Charlie's entitled to his own opinion. I entirely disagree with him. I don't think there's any value to his opinion, but hey, it's his opinion and I respect him that he has an opinion. I'm tolerant of the other's opinion. Then there's a second level. I don't just tolerate and respect Charlie and his opinion. I think there's a value to his opinion. I think his opinion can have some benefit to my opinion. And I think my opinion can have some benefit to his opinion. We're still separate entirely. I don't need him. He doesn't need me, but I think there's some value. And I can influence him somewhat, and his opinion influences me somewhat. It's not bad, it's just has some redeeming value. Then there's the ultimate, which is recognizing that my opinion and his opinion actually complement each other. Me without him will never reach the goal. Him without me will never reach the goal. We need each other to reach the goal. We don't just value the other perspective, we recognize that we're all absolutely necessary in order to reach the goal. And then there's a fourth level. And that is that beneath the surface, we're all the same. Our opinions, our outlooks, that's all above the surface. But beneath the surface, we all have the same core. And what do I mean by that? Take, for example, the Kabbalistic metaphor of this concept. That is the sun, powerful shining sun. And say you have a house that has a number of skylights, and each skylight is a different color. There's a blue skylight, there's a purple skylight, there's an orange skylight, there's a yellow skylight. To the person in the house, he notices various numbers of colorful lights. There's an orange light, there's a blue light, there's a purple light, there's a green light, there's a red light. And he can now analyze those lights. Which light do I like better? There's the purple light, there's the green light. Green is good for one thing, purple is good for the other thing. Don't mix them together. Or there's the hues that come from between the two. There's the beauty of having all the lights together. And then there's one chacham, there's one smart person that says, you know what? That's all beneath the glass. But at the core, it's all the same light. It's all the sun. There's only one sun. It's all one light. So there's the beneath the roof and there's above the roof. That's the way it is in this world. This world is beneath the roof. This world, we see the divine energy as it enters this world through various forms, through the 10 utterances, through various boundaries, through various definitions, various qualities, various capabilities, various skills, and various purposes, goals, and missions. Yankel's goal and mission in life is not going to be the same as Chaim's goal and mission in life. And thereby, that'll affect his skills, his qualities, his capabilities, his gender, his look, his feelings will all be different than the other person. Because everyone has that unique set of a mission, a purpose, why God put them on this world. You're right that ultimately, above the roof, outside, when we look at the essence, the core of everything, everything's divine, everything is godly, everything was created by God. And so really we're all the same. Yeah, but that's the way God sees it. That's God's perspective. But the way we see it, our perspective, us, we're all different. This idea is in all three realms or dimensions, if you will, which Kabbalah terms the dimensions. Here we have 3D, 4D, but Kabbalah sets the world into three dimensions: the dimension of people, dimension of space, and dimension of time. In dimension of space, there are different spaces in this world. There are spaces which are unholy, they're neutral, the United States, the diaspora. There are spaces that are holy, the land of Israel. Within Israel itself, there are 10 gradations, the sages tell us, within Israel. There's the entirety of the land of Israel. There's the city of Jerusalem. Within the city of Jerusalem, there's Temple Mount. Within Temple Mount, there are various levels until the holiest level of space, physical space, the holiest level is the Holy of Holies. Within people, within the Jewish people, we have the Israelites, the Levites, the priests. Then we have Moses, the leaders of the generation. Then we have the high priest, the Kohen Gadol. There's a hierarchy. Some are more holy, some are less holy in their mission in this world. And then in time, we have regular weekdays, we have Shabbat, we have the holidays. And then we have the high holidays, Rosh Hashanah, Yom Kippur. There are days which are less holy, there are days that are more holy. And so on the most basic and primitive level, unity and peace occurs when everyone understands their place. And they don't overstep their boundaries. They don't step out of their boundaries. When everyone understands in a spiritual level that they have a unique mission in this world, and only by sticking to their own mission can their mission be achieved. We're all different, but we can show respect to each other. The second level within understanding this idea is, by example, the priests, the Kohanim. Yes, the Kohanim are different. They have a set boundary. They're different than the average Jew, but they're not separate and apart from the Jewish people. On the contrary, they're commanded to bless the Jewish people, to influence the Jewish people, to show that the boundaries, the apartness does not preclude commingling. And this is in space as well. The temple, on the one hand, remains distinct. It's unique. The Temple Mount is a unique class in and of its own, but it actually influences the entire world. The days of the week the same way. Yes, there's Shabbos and there's the weekdays, but Shabbos influences the weekdays. As the Zohar states, from Shabbos, all the other days of the week get blessed. So there is boundaries, but the boundaries are slowly overstepping each other because they're influencing each other. So boundaries are necessary, but there also must be a means of connection between these boundaries. And the highest level that we mention over here is focusing on a shared goal. Focusing on a shared goal is understanding that everything complements each other, just like a body. It's not that the limb of the foot and the arm are two distinct body parts, but rather the arm can't do what it does without the foot, and the foot can't do without it what it needs to do without the arm. The head can't do what it needs to do without the feet, because if the head has to be somewhere to make a decision, if it doesn't have feet, then it can't go. And the feet, of course, can't do something without the head, because if there's a body without a head, the feet can't do anything. So yes, the feet walk and the hands move and the head thinks, but each one needs each other, because without it, it cannot fulfill its complete mission. They each complement each other. They each possess a different quality than the other, but they're all absolutely necessary. And not only they're absolutely necessary, but they're actually all connected. Which is why, right, if you need a vaccine for the lungs, you put it in the arm. What's a connection? If you need a vaccine for the lungs, put it in the lungs. Why are you putting it in the arm? Because it's all connected. Yes, they're different, but they're all connected. In the words of the Rebbe, text 12, the highest level of peace is, as the Alter Rebbe explains regarding the Jewish people, namely that we all need each other and are one body. Every limb of the human body has its own particular characteristic and advantage that it contributes to the greater good of the rest of the body. So it is with the greater body of the Jewish people. In the Alter Rebbe's words, this is analogous to the human body from head to toe. The feet are admittedly the end of the body, and the head is the top and supreme part of the body. And yet, in some respects, the feet have an edge over the head, insofar as the head is unable to go anywhere without the feet. The feet also keep the body along with the head upright. Another dynamic that demonstrates the interconnectedness of all limbs is the fact that when the head hurts, a shot to the foot can cure and bring healing. What emerges is that the head is incomplete without the feet. And so it is with the Jewish people. We are all one body. This is the ultimate perfection as far as people are concerned. And the same it is with space, and the same way it is as time. Yes, there's Yom Kippur, which is the holiest day of the year, and there's today a regular Tuesday. But you know what? Today is affected by Yom Kippur, and today we affect Yom Kippur as well. They're all interconnected. What we do today affects Yom Kippur. What we do on Yom Kippur affects today. And the same is with space. The Holy of Holies affects the entire world. The land of Israel affects the entire world. There are differences, but these differences don't mean that there's something missing. These differences mean that we all have a unique mission with specific boundaries from the Almighty. This is the way God created us. And by recognizing our boundaries, by recognizing our unique mission, through understanding our boundaries, we'll see how not only are we limited, but actually we complement everyone else. And we're able to affect the entire world. But then comes that fourth level of unity. The fourth level of unity is a deeper, more essential form of unity, a unity that flows from God's core oneness, and it transcends the universe and all of its parameters and boundaries. At the core, we're all one. Not just recognizing how all the colors from the sun complement each other, but understanding that they're mere representations of the fact that there's just one sun. There's only one sun, and that's it. God is truly one. And yes, when God's light is refracted by means of creating the world and expressing God's light in this world, is there an existence of an other, and we have to start searching how we each complement each other? But at the core, there's only one God. And God is united without any need for sophisticated explanations. God is everything. God is one. At the core, everything is God. And how does that affect us? Which is, in one line, we may seem different, but at the core, we're all one because we're all expressions of the divine. Now we can understand Korach's thinking. Korach said, here we are in this world and we're grappling, trying to figure out what our boundaries are, what our parameters are. And through those parameters to recognize that we all have one collective mission. I'm going to go straight to the loftiest goal. I'm going to go straight to the core, straight to the essence. And that is we're all equal because we're all divine. We're all godly. We're all expressions of godliness. Korach saw he was a lofty Jew. He saw how at the core we are all one. All there is really God. So where did he go wrong? It's such a lofty idea. He saw straight through everything, straight to the core. He went wrong because that's not the way God created the world. God created the world for it to have boundaries, for it to have limitations, for it to have day and night, for there to be that hierarchy, for me to have a unique mission, and for you to have your unique mission, and me to have my unique skills and capabilities, and you to have your unique skills and capabilities. Granted, when Mashiach comes, that'll be a time when divinity is revealed for all to see, when everyone will see the essence of everything, when everyone will recognize and grasp and understand that ultimately everything is a divine and everything is godliness. But that's when God decides to reveal that to everyone. But in this world, before Mashiach comes, we ought to see it the way God created the world. And that is with those boundaries, with those clear definitions. There's me, there's you. We all have a different mission in this world. And we all complement each other because without you, I cannot fulfill my mission. And without me, you can't fulfill your mission. And what happens if someone tries to access the Mashiach vision and tries to implement it on a practical level before it's time? It's going to lead to chaos. Right? Too many cooks spoil the stew. It leads to chaos. It's not the way God wants the world. Because every person has this wide array of perspectives, of character traits, of drives, of ideas, of impulses that stay more or less aligned all together when we understand our place. But when someone tries to go against the system and aims to be someone they aren't, it'll lead to chaos. It'll lead to their soul being pulled down to where they ought to be, or their soul will get elevated beyond their conscious self. Essentially, the soul gets split. The higher level of the soul, the lofty level of the soul, which is in tune with its true oneness and expression of God, will soar high to God. Where the lower part of our inner self that can't handle this lofty level because it's not there yet. It's not the way God created the world. It's not what God wants us to be doing. Will descend downward. In other words, when someone tries to reach a goal that they're not holding at, there's going to be a part of their soul that will meld into that lofty goal, but there's going to be a part of their soul that will go in another direction and will leave them feeling even farther from their goal where they should be. And this is why Korach and the rebels' punishments were different, and it reflects their sins. You see, the 250 chieftains, they were holy people. They were refined people. They were divine people. They recognized the greatness of God, of God's unity. They were spiritual leaders. And they were just following what Korach convinced them into. They represent the lofty aspect of Korach's goal. And so they were burned. What does burning symbolize? Elevation, purification. Right? You want to clean gold, you bring it to a very high heat, and then it melts and all impurities are separated from it. Whereas Korach, being the instigator, being the one who clearly went against Moses face to face, he represents that coarse part of the soul that falls back, the coarse part of the inner self, that when trying to reach lofty goals, it's going against its mission on this life, in this world, and so it's going to fall down. And that's why his death, and Dasan and Aviram, the main instigators, their death is symbolized by being swallowed in the ground, swallowed by the negative energy that pushed them to go against the boundaries that God created, that pushed them to go against Moses being the chosen leader of God. The words of the Rebbe, text 14. We can now understand the connection between the punishments of being burned and swallowed alive and the crime of division. Collectively, these two punishments demonstrate the consequences of division, departure, and descent. When something burns, the more refined matter of the item is consumed and goes up. The other elements which cannot be consumed and taken on high are destroyed through the punishment of being plunged into the ground. For this reason, the element of swallowing is featured prominently. This is a reference to that holy energy that exists in the lower levels that becomes susceptible to being swallowed into the negative forces when the boundaries come down. There are well-meaning people who try to break boundaries. But equality, true peace in this world, in our time, is recognizing that everyone has boundaries. Everyone has clear definitions of who they are, what their mission in this world is, and those are the God-given boundaries and definitions. When we uphold boundaries, that's when we can reach true peace the way God intended it to be. That's true equality. Equality doesn't mean sameness. Equality means recognizing that everyone is different. Everyone has a unique mission. Everyone has unique character traits. Everyone has a unique makeup. And that's what makes them special, because that's the way God intended it to be. And only by recognizing those differences do they complement each other, and are they able to reach the ultimate goal of making the world a better place. If we try to break those boundaries, that's when chaos ensues. When you have a company, and the company has clear boundaries of whose job is what, that company is going to work like a well-oiled machine. But when those boundaries start getting broken up, when the one who's supposed to be by the copier is suddenly the one that's making the calls for the investments, and the one that's making the calls for the investments is the one that's supposed to be doing the sales, and the one that's supposed to be doing the sales is trying to do a little bit of everything. Now we got a problem, big problem, because that well-oiled machine is going to start breaking down. When each part knows what its part is, recognizes it, doesn't try to be like a different part, then that well-oiled machine will work really well. And once we work in that time, once we work within our boundaries, once we work recognizing that we all have boundaries, but knowing that deep down, yes, we're all at our core, we're all divine, we'll actually come to a time of true peace, the ultimate level of peace, when that essential core, the divine core, will come to revelation with the coming of Mashiach. May it be speedily in our time.